Hello! Today I'm going to be reviewing the book Game of Thrones by George R.R. Martin, Part 1 in the series A Song of Ice and Fire. I found out about this wildly successful book series after I found out about the HBO show, which, unless you've been living under a rock, you've probably heard about. The Game of Thrones is sort of like a mishmash of medieval fantasy, in a way, except the fantasy is very understated, which is something that I liked about this right off the bat. I ordinarily don't go for fantasy books because it tends to be quite in your face with the fantasy aspect of it, but I really liked this book because it was all very But I liked this one because it was very understated, which made it feel a little bit more real for me. The Game of Thrones is set in Westeros, primarily. There are a lot of locations in this series. There's a few in this one alone, and let me tell you, the characters, there's a few of them to speak about as well. You can't really talk about the plot without talking about the characters, and there are a few characters to talk about, so just take a moment to familiarise yourself with these names. Despite knowing all those characters, it's very difficult to talk about the plot for a couple of reasons. The first reason being is that there is a lot of stuff going on in this book at once. There are a lot of threads to keep track of, and so it's very hard to focus on any one thing because there's not really one main thing. Rather, there are a lot of smaller little plot threads going on at once that converge on one point at some stage or another throughout the book, and that's when things get big. And that brings me to the second reason why I can't talk about the plot too much, because there are a lot of twists and turns in this little bad boy here. Let me tell you, it makes it very difficult to talk about the plot when any real action that happens is something that can spoil a big chunk of the story. It is infuriating recommending this book to someone, as I'm trying to do now, and not being able to talk too much about the plot. I guess it's probably safe to say this, at least, but there is a bit of an incident that happens between Bran Stark, who is one of Eddard Stark's sons, and Cersei and Jaime Lannister. I won't go into it too far, but the event that occurs sort of acts as a bit of a catalyst for some things further on in the book, and as well as the other storylines going on at once, it's a pretty fun ride. One of the things that I really liked, apart from how many shocking twists and turns there are in this book, is just how daring it decided to be with a lot of them. This is a very brave book. It does a lot of things that a lot of people wouldn't dare to do with their stories, in terms of not just the scope, and let me tell you, the scope is huge, and you'll find that out as you go on, but George shows you relatively quickly. He's not mucking around, right? He means business. He takes it seriously. You might find yourself reading something and getting pretty shocked at it, only to read further on in the book and find something you're even more shocked at. That is the nature of this book. There's just turn after turn after turn, and there are just so many surprises. And they get even more daring as the book goes on. It's really quite brilliant, but you got to read the book first. You have to. The book is brilliant. It is a brilliant series. I'm so annoyed with myself that I didn't know about this earlier, before the show started becoming a thing, but it doesn't matter now because I'm a huge fan, and I started with this book. One of the things you might not like about this book, initially at least, is it drags a little bit. It can drag a lot, actually. That's only because it sets up so many plot threads at once. There are so many different things going on with all the different characters that are introduced in this book that it takes a while to get into because of all that groundwork that needs to be built up. But once you've got a fundamental idea of what's going on, it's not hard to get into it. And with the plot twists that start occurring not long after you familiarise yourself with everyone, it's not really that bad. One thing that this book has taught me, which I'm finding pretty invaluable now going on through the series, is patience. It does drag a bit, as I mentioned, and I think in order to get through that, you need to sort of take a bit of a breath at times and really sort of push on. Unless you're a better reader than I am, in which case I envy you a little bit, because I did find that it dragged in spots initially, and there are points throughout the story where you sort of think, well, come on, let's pick it up a bit. But the book always makes up for it, and that's what matters. The patience is necessary to get to those good bits, and once you do, you'll be thanking yourself that you did get on with it and stick with it, because it is so worth it. It's packed full of violence, and, well, that's not maybe the best selling point, but there is a lot of violence. There's a lot of sex, There's a lot of mysticism about old tales of old creatures roaming the earth, like dragons, and myths about White Walkers. You'll get into that in the book. I can't talk too much about any of it, really, because if you start talking about one thing, you've got to talk about another thing, and then it just snowballs into a mess, and this would be all very useless. Just get the book. I guess the next review is going to have to be on book 2. The reason why I'm reviewing this after having read it a little while ago is because I just finished book 4. I wanted to do a book review on book 4, but I figured it's probably a good idea to do the first 3 before I get to book 4. You get the idea. Buy the book. It'll be worth it, I'm telling you. I'm going to put a link in the description below to the book if you should wish to purchase it. I think you really should. It's definitely worth your time. George R.R. Martin, A Game of Thrones, Part 1 in series, A Song of Ice and Fire. I'm going to give it 4.5 out of 5. It's brilliant. That's all I've got for this one. I'll see you in the next review, where it'll probably be book 2 in the series, A Clash of Kings. Cheers.